again with Healing Holden. Sorry. Hi, this is Cynthia again with Healing Holden. I'm just remembering some things that I wanted to mention to you about the emotional toll and the financial toll on a family hit by autism. A lot of times people think, oh, well, you're going to get hit with autism and, let's say autism is caused by a vaccine injury and you your child gets vaccinated and gets harmed, and you'll get help from the system. You can sign up for, you know, United Way or whatever the government assistance is right for it. And I'm here to tell you that, and other parents with autistic kids will tell you there's no such thing as a safety net when you do sustain a vaccine injury, whether it's you or whether it's your child. We tried to sign up for a lot of different things, and one was called DADS, Disability Assistance, blah, blah, blah. And it was a 10-year waiting list. So that was when Holden was 4. And so when he's 14, maybe if things haven't changed, we'll get some assistance. I don't know what kind of assistance that they offer because there's not a whole heck of a lot. And particularly, there's not anything like what we're doing to get him well that actually works. Um, Thankfully, an employer that I had good insurance for autism. Blue Cross Blue Shield was sued because they didn't have ABA therapy coverage, which is basically the only kind of health insurance coverage you really get for anything called autism. You're basically kind of left out in the dark in so many ways because the doctors don't want to touch you with a 10-foot pole. They don't want to touch your kid with a 10-foot pole. And, you've got stuff like, I think I mentioned the original doctor we saw who, you know, when we found out he was autistic, said, when I told him that Holden was having a lot of gastrointestinal problems, like diarrhea, explosive diarrhea, and he wasn't gaining weight and he was failing to thrive. Uh, and I told him that the doctor's like, oh yeah, that's real common with autism. I'm like, okay, so like if I tell you that he's got a broken arm, are you just going to say, "Oh yeah, that's common with autism"? I mean, that's what they do, right? They don't they just you're garbage at that point. You're left on your own. So don't think that we're not getting any money for Holden. There's no social security for Holden. There's, you have to jump through all these hoops to get anything. We did get to take him to the mental health and mental retardation services, and they had some nice Catholic charity, assist them with some things, but it was very little. And this is cost prohibitive. I mean, I think I mentioned in another video that we liquidated everything. So I also want to tell you like what that kind of agony emotionally does to a family, and then the financial cost of it, what it did to, my daughter was growing up. She was um, 15, 14 years old. Well, 15 years old when this started. And she, turned 16 and she turned 17, and this was still going on. And we were just basically, up to our necks in medical bills and in um, different kinds of things that we were doing for Holden because everything came to a standstill. We didn't go have fun. Thankfully, there was a family in our congregation that, wanted to take her to different places, and people, thankfully, in the congregation, people felt for her, and even my sister felt for her and kind of reached out to try and have her come stay with them for a week or so. But no one really reached out for Holden. My best friend babysat. A couple of my closest friends babysat, and they were, um, the only people that really, And then one of our elders in our congregation, he and his wife babysat, and I'm so grateful for that. But it's such a special thing that you really have to have a lot of patience and And most people are afraid. Most people don't even know what to say. I had a boss that when I told him my son was diagnosed as autistic, he didn't say a word. We were in the elevator and he didn't say a word, like he hadn't heard it. And he was a nice guy. But there's so many people that they don't know what to say. And the best thing you can do is um, say, I'm sorry that, try and put yourself in someone's shoes because, some people don't want to say sorry because it's not you know, why should you feel sorry about that? But when it's your child and your child is diagnosed with a what's a learning disability essentially and all this stuff, you would like some sympathy for what you're going through. And it would be really cool to have someone try to step in your shoes for a minute and say, "Oh, well, if that happened to my child, I'd be very worried." Whatever you can do to help. Anyway, so my daughter went to senior year and, there's no senior pictures. She didn't have prom. There wasn't any money to do anything for her, anything special. We couldn't have like a graduation party. There just wasn't anything. We were lucky to be, well, not lucky, but we were blessed to be able to do what we were doing for Holden, but we didn't have anything extra to do anything else. No family. I didn't even take vacations for, up until like, I don't even, I guess I took one now when I went to South America. That's not really a vacation going to bury your father, but that it was just the bare minimum, the requirements. You can't go out to dinners because you're on a special diet. You can bring your food with you, but then if he acts out, um, it, and we wanted to be invited out, but so many people, there was such a stigma about it where so many people were afraid to invite us out. And I think I mentioned before that Holden was uninvited to someone's party who had invited us. And there's so many painful things like that where people just leave you out. They don't know what to do, so they just isolate you more than they contribute to your isolation, whether it's the parent or, thankfully, I think my daughter, people knew her well enough to where they were inviting her over. And since it was just her, they could deal with that. And that was very kind of people to offload that. But, what about Holden? What about us? And to this day, Holden doesn't have any friends. He's 11 and he has some school people that are his friends at school. They're nice to him, but he doesn't have anybody to spend the night with him. And some of the congregation kids, we'd have spend the night, but it's a very difficult thing to go through. And I just watched some videos on some of the Vaxxed experiences, the people that the Vaxxed movie had a bus that was going to different places, and they were interviewing parents like me who had stories. And there was one woman whose son was also deaf. So you can imagine how difficult it was for her to find a school that could handle a deaf and autistic child. And then how few friends he would have, even more so because they would have to know how to sign. And now I want to take sign language. Um, Anyway, it was devastating, and when he was in the throes of the worst of it, where he was, having failure to thrive, I didn't, he was super skinny, I didn't know what to do, and I remember and I tell people, about this, I hope I'm not offending anyone, but I remember freaking out one night. I just had it, and I'm the kind of person where I'm really, 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 really patient, and I let things go, and don't make a big deal and a big fuss about anything until it just builds up and I explode. And I think I had gotten to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. So I was going to work every day, knowing, having to slap a smile on my face, knowing that my son was on fire, back at home, and there was nothing I could do about it. I just had to pretend everything was cool and deal with other people's petty problems while this was going on and just put a smile on my face and try and deal with it. And I just had so very little patience for so many people at the worst of it. I remember, somebody honked at me to hurry up when there was no place for me to go, or I'd like get smashed in traffic. And thankfully I was kind of in front of a restaurant where there was kind of parking, on the side of it. And I parked there and I got out of my car and I just sat. I kind of leaned on against my car and looked at the guy and was like, what, what do you want? I had another guy, try and whistle at me, and I like, it was clearly a bad guy, and I went after him. I was just walking up to his car like, what, you want a piece of this? Anyway, I lost it that night, and I threw myself on my knees on the floor and was screaming, um, like, just kill me. To no one. My ex-husband was there and my daughter was there, and I don't know why he did this, guys. I don't know. I don't know if his bipolar makes him, because my daughter did this too when she was younger, and she called me one time and asked, "Do you think I have what Dad has?" During the divorce, when all this stuff about the bipolar diagnosis came out, because my daughter, I think when she was 3, and Holden has this too. We've gone to a therapist where he will overreact, like a number one, like your pencil breaks is turned into a 5, which the reaction, or the reaction for a number 5 is screaming and yelling and freaking out and throwing yourself on the floor and all this stuff. And that's like, maybe if someone dies, or if there's a tornado, or a terrible accident where someone is really, really hurt, that's a 5. And he was always turning a 1 into a 5. Well, my daughter and my ex-husband did this too. Like, I don't understand it, because I do kind of the opposite. Like, something happens and I'm like, I have like 5-second delay, like on TV, like, okay, unless I'm sick. If I'm sick, then I just don't have any more patience left. I'm trying to think about it and be like, okay, so what's the best response? And what's going on here, and what's going on with them, and is it me? Like, I'm going through all this in my head. They don't. I was at church one day in our congregation. We don't call it church. I was at my Kingdom Hall one day, and my daughter crossed. Oh no, I crossed my legs and I was sitting close to my daughter, and I accidentally kicked her with the tip of my foot. And just as I was bending down to say, "Oh, sorry," because she's 3 at this time, she kicks me super hard, like, when we were first together. One morning I woke up and I was in a good mood and being, I thought, playful, and I tickled him, and he bit my fingers back and nearly broke my fingers, and told me if I ever did that again, he'd break my fingers. So he was always like that, and obviously clearly abusive. Yes, I know. But everything was like, I couldn't understand it. Like, it wasn't computing for me, because this person that seemed logical was just going out of control for little things that, to me, I'm like, because he was kind of on about, don't you see how serious it is? I'm like, no, I don't understand. So then of course, when I lose it after much more, you know, torturous situations, then of course I'm an animal. So anyway, I'm throwing myself on the floor, and I'm just like on the floor, and I'm kind of stumbling through the house. I hit the door. I'm like, just kill me. And I'm just screaming at the top of my lungs. And I always say, like a black woman at her son's funeral, because that's how I felt. I felt like my son was dying. And, I don't mean to be culturally insensitive, but if you've ever, and I'm Hispanic, so we're very emotional. It's just a cultural thing. There's, it's the culture, the Jewish culture is also like the Italians. There are certain cultures that, I know the Irish aren't that, emotional unless they're at a wake. um, I, and then the British have a culture that's different. So you get my meaning. I mean, you've seen that before. I hope so. So I was just, I was there. I was in that super emotional state. And and I'm sorry. I hope I'm not offending anyone. I have a friend who um, told me she's the blackest, that I'm the blackest white girl she's ever met. I'm like, I think that's all Hispanic. Maybe not. Anyway, and she's black. So I'm going to take her word at it. Anyway, so that's all I can do as far as to describe what was going on in our home and how extreme how agonizing all of this is. Um, so anyway, I don't know what happened with my ex and why he did what he did because I didn't, in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, why did he do that? That was kind of weird. He like took our son and took our daughter and like went and hid in her room, like behind the bed with you're gonna think that I'm the nuts one, but like with the door closed and everything. And when I finally chilled out and calmed down, I like went and opened the door and was like, "Why are y'all? What? I'm sorry." And to this, well, I don't know if to this day, but my daughter told me after she left home and everything, she told me she uh, had couldn't forgive me, but something along the lines of she didn't understand, or one of the worst things that happened to her was when I tried to stab myself in the stomach with a knife. And I'm like, no, no, that never happened. Where are you getting this? And she looks at me and she's like, you're crazy. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, I don't know if you hallucinated or if you're just thinking that this happened or if your father said that that's what was happening when he went into the room. And I don't know if he was hallucinating because, like, things like we were at a doctor's appointment recently and he had gotten well, for our son, and he had gotten his hair cut. And it was a place that I knew of. My husband gets his hair cut there. And they did a really bad job. And so I was kind of looking at my son's hair and playing with him on the little bed. And I said, yeah, they didn't do a good job. And then later my ex texts me and he's like, well, what's so dangerous about this place, this barbershop? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, well, you seem so alarmed about Holden's haircut. I'm like, no, I just thought maybe you could take him back so they could fix his haircut. So those kinds of things, like I don't know if he's just making this stuff up because it's the narcissism but then there's bipolar and then there's autism and like I don't know whether he's on purpose trying to mess with me or if he's like really thinking that this is happening. But needless to say, when you have something like this in your family, and this takes place with adults too. There I just recently heard about this woman who she got vaccinated and she basically was going through kind of an adult version of autism or ADHD, where she was just she lost her brain. And there's Alzheimer's, so I don't know that a lot of these Alzheimer's cases aren't being caused by vaccinations. Anyway, it just you end up losing your support system because they don't understand. You end up getting isolated. Um, you end up not being able to do the things that other people can do, and they're going on and living their life, and you're stuck because nobody really understands, and they just kind of look at you typically with pity and or don't believe what you say or don't know if you're crazy because this doesn't happen and it's all because of these lies that they're putting out there about what autism is, what all these mental illnesses are, and the court systems don't see. So you just feel like you're all alone, and it's not a fun world to live in. I don't recommend you guys getting into this. So if you're watching and you haven't, and you're wondering about whether to vaccinate your child or not, uh, it's not worth it. And if you're watching and you know someone whose child has been hit by autism, reach out and help their family because they need it. There's not enough help out there, and there's not enough compassion, and there's not enough thinking about people that have it harder. or thinking about, you know, reaching out to these kids at all. There's a lot of kids I see in Holden's class that nobody reaches out to them. I wish there were more programs in school for the different classes to go and help those kids that are in those classes. There's so much help for kids that are already doing really well. Um, there's so much support your baseball team, support the Girl Scouts, support this and that. But what about the kids that are just kind of left on the sidelines and just ignored and overlooked? I mean, it really is a population of people, disabled um, population who's just completely invisible, and it's really sad. Um, anyway, so that's the emotional toll. It's just dreadful. It's really hard, and I would highly recommend everyone, adopt an autism family. Now that there are so many of them out there, and a lot of people don't even talk about their autistic child. They're not as open as I am about it. And I don't know whether I'm running people away with my openness or if I'm, you know, doing myself a favor, but I feel like if we don't talk about this and have an open dialogue about this, um, the stigma is going to continue. Anyway, thank you. Like, share it if it does anybody any good. And to all you autism families out there or families with mental illness out there, look for support, reach out, and don't don't be shy and don't be embarrassed. Um, and your emotions matter, and your kids that are neurotypical matter too.